All right, so recently I have been tearing a lot of things for my projects, and I wanted to show you guys how to tear things in Houdini with Vellum the dumbass way. So if you're a dumbass like me and you're not the smartest person on your block, I got you. We're gonna make this a simple way. I'm gonna show you 3 ways in this video. So let's open up Houdini and let's actually start a project. All right, so I have Houdini opened here. We're gonna open our container. Let's call this tear. I just want to make a simple animation. So we're gonna make this sphere just go up and then down. Let's scale this down. Then let's get a transform. And on my frame 1, which for me is gonna be 101, but for you it's just gonna probably just be 1. We're just gonna go to frame 60 and set a keyframe there. To set keyframes, what I'm using is Alt and then click with my left. I'm clicking with my left button. Yeah, sorry, I don't know my left and right. So let's just do something like that. By the way, the reason why I do a transform outside of this, you can do the transforms here, but I personally just like seeing a visual explanation of what I'm doing. Because again, I'm stupid. I just want to make things easy. Let's just put a null. And let's call this animation. And here is our animation. It's a crazy animation. So now the animation is done. I want a patch of fabric for it to just break. Let's do a simple setup for that. First idea might be to use a grid, but I'm gonna tell you why this is probably not the best way to do it. The reason why is once you put a grid, it's made out of quads. With cloth and anything that has to do with organic simulations, you do not want quads. You actually want triangles. Quads are more for modeling. For realistic simulations, you want triangles. Okay, so with this grid, even if you put it on triangles, it's gonna give you triangles, but it's not really what looks the best, and it's still not organic. So you could put a remesh under it, and now it makes it into triangles. So what you would use if you're gonna use any other object outside of this, or like a grid, you want to use a remesh to turn it into triangles. But since we actually are just using a patch of fabric, it's actually a no for that. It's just called planar patch. If I click on here, let's put this on the ZX plane. And let's scale this up a little bit to here. All right. So it basically has the same exact things as a grid and then remeshing it, but with this edge length, it just makes it a lot easier to control. All right, so we have our patch. Now let's actually make this into a Vellum object. And to do so, we're gonna do our setup for Vellum. It's actually really simple. It's gonna need a Vellum configure cloth. Then you need a Vellum solver. So now it's a Vellum object, but there's one problem. It's falling into the space of nothing. And I don't want that. What I want are these 4 corners to still hold up by who knows what, but just have it pinned up so only this part falls down and everything still stays with gravity. Let's do a quick and easy, simple setup on pin groups. So I'm going to put a group node down and let's change a couple things. 1, I want to put this in points so I get the points. And 2, this is my personal thing. I personally like using $OS. And $OS, what it's just going to do is just take the name from the actual node. And I'm just going to call this pin animation. You can just put it under here, but I just personally don't like doing that. So with this brace group, you could go in here and just select them all and press enter. And there, you got those selected. But that's stupid. The reason why that's stupid is, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna show the numbers here. If I were to be like, hey, I want to either A, the simulation is running too slow and it has too much geometry and I want to make less points, then if you look at the yellow, it's going away because those numbers don't exist anymore. Or if I were to say, hey, I want to do a high poly version of this and I decrease the numbers, well, now my things are all over the place. And then I just had to go back in and I had to redo that. So you don't want to do it this way. In anything in groups, you typically don't want to have any actual numbers or any actual selections if you can avoid it. The reason why is because Houdini, you do a lot of backwards thinking. Even like it's a lot of, sometimes you want to update something, you want to tweak something, and you don't want to make it so hard coded in. So let's actually fix this, and let's do this in not the Vex way. The Vex way is what I prefer, but let's just do it in the stupid way or in the most intuitive way. A lot of people complain that Houdini is not intuitive. It is actually very, very intuitive. Once you figure out the system and figure out how to think about Houdini, it's actually really, really straightforward, I want to say, but it is that intense learning curve. But once you get over that curve, you're able just to think on the fly a lot more. Also, I've low-key been learning a lot more in Houdini as far as like 3D goes, a lot faster rather than when I was stuck in Blender. So take that with a grain of salt, but we're going to do this the most intuitive way without using any Vex or VOPs or nothing like that. What I want to do is I want to have a bounding object. So let's get a box. And let's turn off the numbers. And let's template this by pressing this pink right here. So now let's transform this and scale it down. I don't want it to take that much space. Basically, what you're doing with your bounding object, wherever it crosses, it's going to take that as a point. And I want to do this. I'm going to move this into these corners here. So this is in the right area. And I want to do copy and transform, and I'm just gonna move here, this box here, into this corner like that, and then we're gonna do another copy and transform because I have two boxes here. I just want this on this other side. You could also do a mirror. You could do a lot of things, but it's Houdini. You can always do something other than what you're doing. So now I'm just going to take this. I'm going to take this copy and I'm going to put it into my bounding object. All right, so now we're going to click on keep in bounding regions, click enable, and instead of bounding box, we're going to do bounding objects. So we just put into the second input, it's going to read that in. So now let's take this group and let's go to our vellum cloth. If you scroll down and the pinpoints, pin animation. All right, so now it's pinned, but I do want our ball to collide with this object. So let's just bring that in. Just gonna take this and we're just gonna collide our geometry right there. Let's simulate it again. Okay, so this is just going to be our basic setup. Now I want to actually start tearing this cloth. And to do so, we're going to need one important node, which is going to be the edge fracture. Okay, so with this edge fracture node, what it does here is it's gonna break up your cloth into many pieces. And if I just go into here and I simulate this, it's gonna do this. So it's working, but it is breaking just off of gravity alone. And the reason why is because these pieces are separate now. They need to be welded back together, and then we have to tell it to break if there's a certain amount of stress between the points. And to do so, let's weld them first. We can put another Vellum constraints, and we can do weld points. Just gonna put that in the middle of this. And just like that, it's weld. So just off of doing that, let's resimulate. To make a tear, we now have to tell it, okay, at this amount of stress, I want these points to let go, if you want to put it that way. Whenever you are looking at a vellum stitch, these are your weld points. And with your constraints, they're just telling what are the relationships between these 2 points. So what I want is I want it to break when there's a certain amount of stress or a certain amount of stretch, if you want to put it that way. And to do so, we're going to go down to breaking and go to breaking threshold. So we're going back to our original problem. Is just off the gravity alone, it's breaking. And I don't want that. I want a little bit more strength applied to it. So it's just really going to interact with my ball. So that's where you can just play with the breaking threshold. If you make it a higher threshold, it means that there needs to be a little bit more stress for it to break. So let's resimulate that. Okay, so it is technically working. The only problem now is, one, I don't want it on my sides. And I mean, I could keep on just going back and resimulating it. You're not really gonna have too much control. Because even if I do this, it's not giving me what I want. So this is where you start getting into 3 different ways on how to hair fabric in Houdini. So after you have your setup, this is where it starts to differentiate what do you need. So I'm gonna show you the first way. First way is just using the edge fracture right here. And you could say, instead of having pieces like this, you could draw a curve, put it onto the X-plane, and wherever I draw this, I go back to my edge fracture. It's also gonna read that in as some cuts. You even turn off the initial pieces, so you're only gonna get this. So right now, what it's doing is it's technically keeping all this as one cloth, and this is where the only openings are onto the actual fabric. So if we go back and simulate this with our original threshold of 0.1, let's see what happens. So this is the first version, and best thing about this is you could put more points, you could change anything you want out of this, but since you're drawing those curves, if I decided to lower the amount, they still stay in its form. So no issue with that. All right, so that's the first version. And then let's just make sure we merge. So the benefit of this one, if you want to be precise, this is your node, this is your workflow. But I want to make this a little bit more procedural and I want to have a little bit more control. So let's show you the second way. All right, so for the second way, we're gonna use the same exact setup. Just gonna copy those nodes over, make sure everything is correct. Instead of using our draw curves, we're gonna get rid of that node. Okay, so this version, we're gonna use attributes rather than just curves, because I want this to have a little bit more pieces go off, and I also just want to just basically control it in a different way. Both ways are great, but this is just another way to do it. So we're gonna go to edge fraction node, and the benefit of this is that I could make this into a million pieces, and they'll have its own way of breaking. So let's turn back on initial pieces, and maybe let's go to 1,000. So when you have a threshold and it's not scaling by anything, right now it's just applying 0.1 to every little point here, which is not what we want, because at the end of the day, I want these points around here for it to stay strong, but I want these to be very weak. So how do you do that? If you look at your geometry spreadsheet right here, all of this is also -1. Some of them are 0.1, but you get what I'm saying. Okay, so how do we make this? It's pretty simple. All you have to do is attribute paint, or just add that attribute before. So to activate this, we're just gonna go here, scale by attribute, and just copy this name. And after our edge fracture, I'm just gonna attribute paint. So with the attribute paint, instead of it being called mask, you go to attributes and just paste that attribute that's gonna call for. So what's happening right here? Blue means 0, and if you paint on it, let's make sure we're on here so it's faster. The red means 1, and then it just gradually transitions. So I could just paint my corners like this. If I look at my break threshold scale, you see different numbers here, which means that it has different variation on for it to break. So let's simulate this. Let's see what happens. So these are doing what I wanted to do, but the middle is not doing what I wanted to do at all. The reason why is because if you go back to attribute paint, blue means 0. So you just have to increase this. So maybe let's do 0.2. You do something like this in here, because that's the main place I want it to affect. I could do 0.5 for the general other area. And let's see what happens. Let's just simulate that. Okay, so it's now working, but now this is where you're kind of playing the game of figuring out the threshold. All right, so here's it simulated. I just went to 0.50 for the breaking. It's really just playing with the numbers at this point, and now this works. So now you have the ability to paint whatever you want instead of just using curves. There are a couple other ways to do this. I'm going to show you one last version. The reason why you kind of don't want to just do it this way is because if you decide, hey, I want to update this, attribute paints over the points. So if you change the amount of points by any version, it's gonna mess up the attribute paint. So now I'm gonna show you the third and final way. It's gonna be a step up in difficulty, but it's actually really simple. But this is gonna be the most procedural out of all of them. So we're gonna do the same exact setup. instead of our attribute paint, we could delete that. So you could do this in a couple ways. I'm gonna do this. I want, again, from the middle, I want this to be very weak and the sides very, very strong. So to do that, I'm gonna use an attribute transfer. So all attribute transfer does, it takes one attribute and it interpolates from two different objects based off the distance. So how do you set this up? For attribute transfer to work, you have to have the same attribute on both objects. So if you want to transfer another color to another object, you have to have the color attribute for both. So what we need is the break threshold scale attribute. Okay, so let's create this attribute. And we could do breakhold threshold scale. And for this one, I'm gonna make 1. And let's just visualize this so we can see what we're doing. All right. Okay, so now it has the break threshold scale and it's at 1, so it's very strong. You could do the same thing on another object. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna use a sphere. And I'm just gonna copy this node. I don't have to reset it. And I'm gonna make this 0.2. So basically I wanna take this patch, which is gonna be 1, and I want the lowest number to 0.2 based off of this distance of the sphere. So how do you transfer that? Well, with an attribute transfer. So you're gonna plug that in. It's gonna turn on blue. Reason why is because conditions on this usually suck. So I'm gonna change the distance threshold, and boom. So this is where the magic starts. I'm gonna turn down the scale a little bit here, maybe something like that. Maybe the blend width, we do something like that. And the best part about this is that you could change this on the fly. So maybe do 0.1 here, blend width like this. Maybe maybe we do something like this. Cool. So now it has the breakhold threshold scale. It's super procedural. And all we have to do is simulate it one more time. And it should work out the gate. But, you know, Houdini, you never know. So let's simulate it real quick. So this is going to be the third version of how to tear things with Vellum. And this is the one that I kind of use a little bit more in my projects. But every single one does have its own use case. You don't always have to do this way. But yeah, we're going to do a side by side. This is basically all of it side by side. Should look basically almost the same, but it's going to have its own characteristics for each one. And so this is just going to conclude how to tear stuff in Houdini for dumbasses. If you're a dumbass like me, these 3 ways you could probably tear up anything. There are a lot more advanced setups to this. They just build on top of this. You could always build, like adding noise to your attributes or anything like that. Noise always adds realness, but from here, this is just the most basic, stupid way on how to tear stuff in Houdini. But if you did make it down to here and you want a little bit more of an advanced way on how to build on anything like that, or make these a lot more lively, yeah, comment tear and I'll drop a advanced version of this and break down a little bit more on my projects and how I use it.